I'm going to tell you a story. Now, the stories I tell here, the Storytime stories, are about things that happened to me. But this is a different story. This is something I saw. I saw with my own eyes. I was in a privileged position to watch this story unfold, and I'm going to tell you all about it right now. It's about a lawyer. A very successful lawyer. He was a rich man. I mean, this guy drove a BMW, I recall. This was back in like '92. I was 24 years old and I was working at this law firm as a drone. You know, just a project assistant, I was called. I was supposed to basically photocopy documents. It was boring. But anyway, my point is, you see, this partner at this firm, this lawyer, he was a big deal at the firm. You know, he commanded a troop of associates. You know, I think he had like, I don't know, a couple of dozen associates under him, not to mention the junior partners and even some partners who were sort of like not as senior as he was. He was a big deal. And I remember him very clearly because not only did I work for him, but often as not, we would both go to the smoking lounge that existed. This was, like I said, in '92 when smoking lounges still existed in buildings. And he'd smoke the cigar and do his paperwork and so on. And he had this great suit. I mean, not the same suit every day, of course. Different suits. It was a double-breasted. You know, he looked sharp as hell. He was a capable guy. You know, Harvard law. It was a big deal. He was a big deal. And he raked in a lot of money. I mean, several $1 million a year at that point. He was the lawyer for a very, very large insurance company. The lead outside counsel for this very large insurance company. Now, I'm not going to name it, just as I'm not going to name the man or even the law firm where I worked where this happened. But my point is, see, I had a really good idea of what was going on with his life because as a PA, I had to do a whole bunch of little grunt work tasks and, you know, be a little drone doing stuff. So, you know, I just happened to be around when some things happened and some documents passed in front of me and what have you. And so what happened was that around the summertime, this lawyer, who was very successful, as I said, was going to go on his first vacation in 10 years or something like that, some absurd amount of time. He was going to go on this, like, I think it was a 3-week vacation to Europe. I think it was 3 weeks. And he was going to go to a bunch of different countries with his family. He had several children and his wife, and they'd been married the whole time. And this was before the telecommunications boom. There were no cell phones, you know, there was barely email. And so his client was feeling a little nervous because there were some issues going on. Nothing that couldn't be handled, you know, nothing urgent, as it were. And they were a little nervous that he was going to go on this vacation. But, you know, it was the summer, you know, nothing was really going to happen. And so, anyway, he went to the trouble of finding out, scheduling out every single place where he's going to be. I mean, I'm talking even the restaurants. I saw this document. It was this, you know, 20-page document, and each page was where he was going to be on that day. And I'm talking the hotel and the number for it. Then the restaurant where he and his family were going to have breakfast and the telephone number for that. And the museum and this place and that place. I mean, everything, okay? Everything was structured and mapped out, all so that the big client of this big-time lawyer would be able to get him at a moment's notice if anything ever happened. You know, he would never be more than 5 minutes away from any telephone, okay? Recall, this was '92, there were no cell phones. So he was all set to go on this grand vacation with his family, this incredibly structured vacation. I mean, no room at all for spontaneity. He had to go exactly where it was listed, even the restaurants. I mean, even the toilets, for crying out loud. Anyway, he was all set to go, and then this big insurance company, you know, they called him up. Like less than a week before he was going. I mean, days before he was set to go. And they told him that they didn't feel comfortable with him going on this trip. So he canceled the trip. Like, you know, 4 days before they were scheduled to go. That's a true story. I saw it. I was there. Mm-hmm. This guy was a slave. A modern day slave in a beautiful gray flannel double-breasted suit with this, you know, sort of like green aqua colored BMW, like a sedan, really beautiful car. You know, with his very expensive cigars and his beautiful office. It had been like his office, his partner office had been like remodeled. He had wooden floors, you know, like very expensive ash, I remember, you know, and he liked to write his documents on a stand. He didn't like to sit. He'd like to stand up like almost like a professor, and he had this little stand, and he would, you know, make notations on his documents. And he had all these lawyers working at the firm jumping for him every time he looked at them. I mean, he just had to say boo, and you know, these lawyers would faint in terror. You know, he was this big deal, but he was a fucking slave. He couldn't go on vacation because his client was worried that something might happen over the fucking summer. Huh? So anyway, I left the law firm shortly after that. It was one of the best experiences in my life because I had wanted to be a corporate lawyer. I thought it would be something that I would really enjoy and all the rest of it. And I saw it and I discovered that no fucking way. I didn't want to be that, you see. Now, here's the thing. You see, this man, he went to law school. Like I said, he was a sharp guy. He went to Harvard Law. And, you know, they don't graduate morons there, right? He graduated and, you know, climbed the corporate ladder and went into working at this big corporate firm, and he was very successful and earned a lot of money. Like I said, he earned millions as this lawyer. But he had all of these obligations, kids in college, but the rest of it, the lifestyle, you know. He was into expensive paintings, I recall. You know, he was on this committee that chose the artwork for the firm, and it was all very expensive paintings. It was all you know, money everywhere. But the guy was a slave. He couldn't do what he wanted to. He couldn't go on a fucking vacation. He was beholden to other people. Now, some men want that, and some men actually need that. Nietzsche wrote very perceptively about that, the master-slave mentality. And some men need to be slaves. Even if they're slaves at a very high level, they need to be slaves. All right? Now, I think it's very important that you decide what you want to be, how you want to be. If you want to be a slave or you want to be a master. In Spanish, there's a saying, mejor cabeza de ratón que cola de león, which literally means it's better to be the head of a mouse than to be the tail of a lion. I used to think that. Now I have a more sophisticated appreciation because I realize that some men need that structure in their lives to be the slave, to be the tail of the lion, to be just one more year. They need that structure. If they don't have that structure, they sort of like fall apart, they dissipate, they just, you know. I suppose, you know, in biology, I'm trying to recall offhand the name of that membrane that surrounds cells, and that some cells, you know, for whatever illness or disease, they lose that exterior, you know, membrane, and they just dissipate. You know, some men are like that. They need this membrane provided by the society around them to hold them together. Perhaps it was the case with this lawyer. I don't know. I mean, I saw what happened to him, but I didn't really know him. But my point, the story is worth thinking about. Because obviously he was getting a lot of advantages out of the life he was living. He had sacrificed his freedom for a lot of material possessions, status, a big part of it. But he could not do as he pleased. Now you have to think to yourself, what kind of life you want to be living? Do you want status? Because a lot of times in order to have status, you have to surrender a certain amount of freedom. Or do you prefer the freedom to do as you please and forego status, forego the companionship of peers and the companionship and feeling of belonging that you get when you are a part of a social environment? You see what I'm saying? But you have to decide. It's a very difficult decision. But my point, you never want circumstances to decide for you. You want to make the conscious decision Whether you are going to be the lawyer who is not free, even though he has a lot of perks for being the slave that he is, or if you want to be the homeless man. You see, the homeless man, he's free, you know, but he has nobody around him to catch him if he falls or slips up, you know. He is on his own, all right? And maybe he's a homeless man, and maybe he stops being a homeless guy and, you know, makes money doing something somehow, you know, somehow manages to figure out a way, but, you know, he's completely adrift from the society around him. Not a part of it. You have to decide these things, and they're very important decisions. Because, you see, you don't want to be a man who inadvertently made a decision in one direction or another, and then a few decades later look back on your life and say, oh man, I made a huge mistake. See? And I was stupid. I just let myself drift into this life. See, you don't want to do that. You want to decide. Because if you decide that this is the life that you want, to be a slave or to be completely free, you know, if this is your decision that you consciously made, then by the mere fact of making the conscious decision, you will be happier. Because you will know that it was your choice, not somebody else. Because you never want to be beholden to other people's decisions. The decisions you make, you want them to be yours.